Good morning and welcome to this Jerusalem Press Club briefing. I am Jonathan Beck, Director of Content. Our guest today is Brigadier General in Reserves Amir Avivi, former aide-de-camp to the Chief of Staff, former Deputy Controller of the Security Forces. He was Deputy Commander of the Gaza Division and served in several other commanding roles. More importantly, Avivi now is one of the founding members at the IDSF, the Israel Defense and Security Forum, a think tank of former high-ranking IDF officials devoted to finding solutions to Israel's security concerns. Thank you, Amir, for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Okay, first of all, let's get the word games out of the way. Is Muhammad Dein dead?
Well,
and does it matter?
I hope so. I think that IDF had pretty accurate intelligence as for its whereabouts, and the fact that he was together with the brigade commander of Khan Yunis in this compound that was attacked. I think that we can learn a lot from this attack about what is really going on in Gaza in several aspects. One is that 9 months ago, 7th of October, when Hamas started its attack, defense in war was sitting in war rooms, which look pretty much like the Kiryat, the war room of Israel, enjoying command and control with the cameras and the communications and controlling 35,000 terrorists that were organized in companies, battalions, brigades, a whole army. And now the same death, sitting in a shack with no communications at all, no ability to control nothing, no picture of what's going on in the different places in Gaza. And when the IDF is saying we are destroying Hamas as a military entity, this is exactly what they mean. The commanders of Hamas, and Dein is the chief of staff of Hamas, is the top leader commanding the forces. I'm trying to imagine our commander, Amir Avivi, sitting in a tent and commanding the IDF. Probably wouldn't work so well. So I don't think that Hamas is controlling today what is going on in the Gaza Strip. Certainly not the way it was 9 months ago. This is one aspect. The other aspect of this attack is that I think we forgot that a year and a half ago, 2 years, 4 years ago, a target like that the IDF attack would mean immediately Hamas saying at 9 p.m. we're going to shoot 200 rockets on Tel Aviv or Beersheba or whatever, and no response. No response, not because they don't want to, because they lack the capabilities. The IDF is systematically destroying Hamas. And I think that this specific attack is a very, very good example of the reality on the ground. And because many people are asking questions, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? And we see actually what the impact really is. And we have to remember that Hamas is the size of ISIS. ISIS at the peak was 35,000, 40,000 terrorists, much less trained than Hamas, much less equipped, and certainly not enjoying the vast infrastructure that we see in the Gaza Strip, talking about the tunnels. And it took years to destroy ISIS with a whole coalition, global coalition. So what the IDF is doing, even looking at constraints like munitions, the amount of ground forces, international pressure, even when we connect all of that, it's pretty amazing.
Okay, so let's delve deeper for a second, because first of all, I want to challenge, because they say every person has a replacement, and the IDF treated the assassination of Dein as if he was really special, like Qasem Soleimani. So setting aside the fact that this cat has evaded like many strikes, is like taking him by installments until they finally got him. So that's kind of a myth that he has, which is an anecdote. But was he like an operational genius? A. And secondly, this morning we have strikes on Nuseirat. We have messages from the IDF spokesperson about tunnels in Rafah. Like, the Gaza Death Star keeps producing more weapons, more tunnels, more. You're talking about this systematic effort, but there should be a point where we say, you know, they're 5% strong. They're like, when is the end point? It's not like the last surviving terrorist.
Right. So talking about death is something else. It has become a myth. And when terrorists, not only in Gaza, but even in Jordan or in Judean Samaria in the West Bank, when they say we are soldiers of death. Death is, is the commander, not Sinwar. And he has been for a very long time. So providing that we really manage to target him, this is a very, very big deal. And it's a game changer. I'm not saying that people don't have replacement, but it will have a huge impact on the war. And of course, we need to also find Sinwar. Talking about the fighting, I was a battalion commander in Operation Defensive Shield in 2002. April 2002, the operation started. In April 2002, I got command of 800 soldiers and found myself fighting a first fight in the next 2 years. In Operation Defensive Shield, we did basically in the Palestinian cities, they went back what we're doing now in Gaza. It was a different kind of warfare, but overall, we took control of the cities. It took us a month and a half to take control of the cities. It took us 5 years to stabilize the situation afterwards. So when we talk about Gaza, unless there is a complete surrender and everybody puts their weapons down and we have an instant change, and it can happen, by the way, if we do the right things. But if it doesn't happen like that, yes, we'll destroy Hamas as a military and governmental entity, but we'll have to spend years degrading capabilities, operating on daily basis all over Gaza to dismantle this huge, unprecedented terror infrastructure that has been built inside the Gaza Strip. It's a very long-term process, which is not supposed to reach zero terrorism, but it's supposed to bring terrorism to such a low point that it will be a non-issue for the state of Israel. It might be an issue for the Gaza Division, but not for the state of Israel. And we were in this reality for many, many years prior to Oslo. And this is where we need to go back. And this will require IDF presence both in Philadelphia to prevent a build-up again inside Gaza, and also full freedom of operation for the IDF everywhere in Gaza. I cannot see this ending. I think it will be like in the West Bank, Judean Samaria, for a very, very long time.
Okay, so I just have to. It's a good segue to Philadelphia, because I read in a newspaper this morning in Hebrew, I don't remember which one, that the Egyptians are getting upset with Israel about the way it's holding Philadelphia, and let's pop this bubble. For months there was like this intense opposition to the taking over of Philadelphia and Rafah, and nobody spoke about the fact that they have something to lose there, like a financial. I would call it, some kind of bribe to lose. So, is that really the outlook? Is Israel planning to hold Philadelphia on its own for a long time? Because I know we're talking about the other forces coming. Will this artery remain in Israeli hands for like years now to come?
Well, as you mentioned, Jonathan, I was Deputy Division Commander of the Gaza Strip. I was also a Chief Combat Engineer Officer in the Gaza Strip in the 90s. I already dealt with tunnels at that time. And I also commanded the Egyptian border, the brigade commander of the Sagi border. So I know this area very, very well.
Before there was a fence, yeah?
Before there was a fence, right. And can say this. On one hand, we have a peace agreement with Egypt. We have deep security relations. Israel was and is very proactive in assisting the Egyptians to fight ISIS in the Sinai Peninsula. And on the other hand, the Egyptians are enabling in the last 30 years endless amount of weapons and capabilities that are going through the Sinai Peninsula into the Gaza Strip. Everything we see in the Gaza Strip comes from the Egyptian border. Yes, there is also factories or industries inside Gaza, which were destroyed, by the way, most of them. But the capabilities, the goods, everything is coming from Egypt. People are making billions out of this enterprise. And in a way, this is pretty devastating because the Egyptians are undermining us. They are maybe not fighting us directly, but weaponizing Hamas to such an extent that it's unbelievable. Now, I know well this border. There was a certain point where the Egyptians said to Israel, you let us put only policemen here. They're not really well trained. We don't have enough. Let's please enable us to bring battalions to Rafah, which are border patrol, not police. We did that. We enabled the Egyptians to bring very serious forces, and nothing changed. When we see in the Philadelphi Corridor tunnels, by the way, the IDF uncovered until now more than 20 tunnels. 20. Now I'm telling you that if I was commander of this...
What 20 tunnels, what? Egypt, Gaza tunnels? Crossing tunnels?
Yes, I'm talking about Egypt, Gaza, and not only 20 tunnels with 3 stores, like 3 plants high. It's unbelievable. It's a whole city connecting.
The tunnels from where the Mercedeses went in, no? Like the cars.
Yeah, you have trucks driving inside these tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was commander of this 12 kilometers, 9 miles, whatever it is, I would need one company. A mosquito wouldn't cross. I know what it means to secure a border. This is not how you secure a border. And this means that Israel can trust only Israel. If we want to prevent the buildup of terror inside Gaza, we need to be on this border physically. And this is an argument that we in IDSF are having with the army now, with the government, saying, don't even think about talking about some kind of technological barrier without soldiers. This is going back to the 6th of October. It cannot be done. I know it because I commanded borders. You need boots on the ground to control the border. And also we need to take in account that even looking at it from the point of the kidnapped people who are in Israel, I mean, the deal we're talking about is the hostages, at best, 33 hostages that will be released. It means most of them are not going to be released. Hamas wants us to withdraw from Philadelphi Corridor. This means that if we do that, we might find 40 hostages in Iran. They will take them to the Sinai Peninsula at this stage. We cannot afford this. I'm not even talking about the buildup of power. There are huge amounts of weapons and operatives waiting in the Sinai Peninsula to go into Gaza to fight.
Right now?
Right now, as we speak, huge stockpiles of weapons and also operatives are waiting to go into Gaza to fight. We cannot...
Are these the same gangs? I mean, the Egyptian army is there, no?
Sinai Peninsula is huge. It's a huge area. And the police is in very specific areas, and you have whole areas that are either deserted or controlled by ISIS. Northern part of the Sinai Peninsula, ISIS is very dominant. And I must say that, we tend to forget the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. The waves of this withdrawal will feel them like 50 years ahead. It's the buildup that is happening as we speak in Afghanistan of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, of other Muslim Brotherhood elements is undergoing as we speak. And this is impacting the Middle East in many ways, and it's also impacting the Sinai Peninsula. And therefore, the issue of Philadelphia is a big, big deal. And what Israel will decide will really decide the fate of this war, if it's going to be a decisive victory or a catastrophe. And there's no reason why it won't be a decisive victory.
Okay, I mean, I'll give you two reasons why this will be a decisive victory. Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I understand the need for the slow action, except unlike the West Bank, what you have here, you mentioned the hostages, and you have the evacuees. Not only here, but in a war of attrition in the north, which is at the state where Hezbollah says, you know, when you stop there, we'll stop here. Now, I understand the tactical need in your thinking, and I'm not going to say whether I share it or not, but that to keep Philadelphia and fight in Gaza over the long term, regardless of like political stance, but this is affected by the, let's call it the civil picture in Israel, the evacuees and the pressure. I mean, how do we do this like slow cooking fighting of rooting out terrorism when we have evacuees?
So we need to think strategically, not tactically, and I want to explain the overall strategy. We have two choices, or two narratives that are being pushed. One says, we need to stop the war. Let's stop. We had enough. 9 months, it's a long time, you know, and as you say, you have evacuees, and they're shooting in the north, and we're fighting in Gaza. Let's stop. Let's finish with this. And if we stop, then the fighting in Gaza stops. If the fighting in Gaza stops, then the fighting in Lebanon stops. If the fighting in Lebanon stops, then maybe we can even do a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, and it sounds great. There's only one small problem. That one, we're not going to get all the hostages because they will never release all of them. There is no scenario of talking about all the hostages. The other thing is that Hamas is not going to be destroyed. They're going to rebuild themselves. We'll find Hamas in half a year or in a year with 100,000 terrorists. At the same point we were on the 6th of October, even worse. It will be worse because if Israel cannot defeat the weakest enemy we have, Israel is going to pay heavily. And we are going to a much bigger war. Even if we'll buy a few months, even if we'll buy a year of quiet, I can promise you that both the South and the North will find themselves in a year or two evacuated again in a much worse condition. It's not an option. This is not an option. And all the talking about stopping the war is really pushing towards a complete existential threat for the state of Israel. Israel has only one choice. First, the cornerstone of our national security in the context of what we are experiencing now, Israel has only one choice: destroy Hamas completely. And we can do it, and we're on the verge of doing it. We're going to destroy them. But having said that, we understand that we are reaching a point that we don't need so many forces to do it. I mean, we're reaching the point where we're dismantling Hamas as a military entity. Yes, there are terrorists scattered in different places in Gaza, but to deal with this situation and then deepen our capability to degrade their capabilities, you might need maybe one division to stay in Gaza, a part of the Gaza Division, and you can take all other forces in the north. Now, the north, theoretically, there could be a diplomatic solution that says that Hezbollah will withdraw according to Resolution 1701 from South Lebanon, and this theoretically can create the terms for our citizens to go back home. But realistically speaking, the chances that Hezbollah will withdraw diplomatically from South Lebanon are low. They are low because of lack of American leadership, because unwillingness to pose a military threat on Iran and Hezbollah. There is no real pressure on them. What would be the motivation for them to retreat? And if they don't retreat, we have only one choice. We have to go to war And we have to, in a war in the north, it's not like in the south. We cannot put a goal that says destruction of Hezbollah. We cannot destroy Hezbollah like we can destroy Hamas, because Hezbollah can withdraw more and more north. They can even withdraw to Syria. We're not going to conquer off Lebanon. So we have to set expectations. In order to bring back our citizens, we need to launch a full-scale attack on Hezbollah from the air. All of their capabilities, we need to conquer South Lebanon and destroy Hezbollah and their infrastructure in South Lebanon. And this is what we can achieve. Now, when we bring back our citizens, and it can happen in a month or 2 or 3, when they come home and look north, they need to see IDF, not Hezbollah. For how long? For as much as it needs to be. Few months or a few years or more. And this, strategically speaking, will also set the stage for the biggest issue, Iran. Iran is moving towards nuclear capabilities. The Western society will have to deal with them, or Israel will have to deal with them. And if you take out of the equation Hamas and Hezbollah, it's a whole different ballgame. And what will happen in Iran, among other things, will be dependent a lot on the elections in the US. What administration will be, what will be the motivation to show more leadership and strength. Worst case scenario, Israel will have to deal with this alone. But after taking care of Hamas and Hezbollah. Best scenario, we build a coalition that will stand strong again against Iran, against this front that has emerged in the Middle East, backed up also by Russia and China. An alliance that will extend all the way to Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Oman, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Europe, States. Coalition that can also be a magnet to other countries who today are considering their alliances, because the East is organized and resolute, and the West is a mess. And in this scenario, countries like North Africa, even in the Middle East, Iraq, Lebanon, they seriously consider allying themselves with the East. We have to remember that China today is the #1 trade partner of most of the countries in the Middle East. Their trade is going up and up and up, and US trade down all the time, because the US doesn't need oil from the Middle East. So what does the US have to offer in this region? And the answer is military power. And if you are not willing to use it or be strong, you lose relevance. And this is not something we can live with in the Middle East or globally, because Iran and its partners they want to control all the trade routes globally. Hormuz, Bab el-Mandab, Gibraltar. Iran is undermining Morocco. It's training Polisario. It's weaponizing Algeria. Why? Because they want to control Gibraltar and the entrance to Europe. This is serious. And we need to be proactive. And the only way to connect the West and the East is a strong Israel in the middle. You need a strong Israel. Israel will not be strong if we don't defeat Hamas, and if we don't hit very hard Hezbollah and create the terms for bringing back our citizens safely home.
Okay, thank you very much for this. I don't know, I mean, until November, and until that, there's quite a few months to go, and we're like managing this war in the meantime, amidst all those limitations in munitions, etc. But are you basically saying Israel should maybe, in a wider context, look to new alliances outside of the West?
I think this is the American plan. I mean, the whole idea of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. is creating a Western-Israeli-Sunni alliance that will challenge Iran. And I think this is a need globally to build this alliance. As I said, it will extend all the way to Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on, and will really enable to secure all the trade in the world, to secure and stabilize the Middle East, to deal with the Iranian threat and the nuclear threat that they want to pose. So it took this administration, the Biden administration, 3 years to understand that this is what's needed. And when they started to push this, Iran decided to disrupt this process by launching Hamas to an attack. Now, the administration was talking about normalizing relations again, but the terms they put are a non-starter. Saying to Israel that doing a normalization with Saudi Arabia requires a Palestinian state, it's a non-starter. Saying that we have to normalize relations but not willing to build a coalition and challenge Iran is a non-starter. And therefore, I think that this administration hasn't created the motivation, not in Saudi Arabia, not in Israel, to move with this process. But if there will be a change in the policy and an understanding that we need this peace agreement first and foremost to deal with Iran, and we need a strong America to deal with Iran, then we can talk business. No, it reminds me that one of the meetings I had with Ron Dermer, Minister of Strategy, said to me that he met with a high official, from the administration who was lamenting, was saying, you Israelis, you talk to the Russians, you talk to the Chinese, you don't really assist enough Ukraine. He was very upset. And Ron told him, it's like a boy dating a girl. And the girl is dating also other boys, and he's really upset. And all he needs to do, put the ring. So America needs to put the ring on Israel's finger. And putting the ring is getting serious with Iran. And not because of Israel. Because Iran is a global challenge, it's a global threat, it's a threat also to the US. And we need to really get serious and deal with this.
Okay. It's a message we hear, and it's the head of the octopus, obviously. I just want to forward one question from a reporter. There's apparently a scheduled meeting in China between members of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. I was not aware of this. Can you say maybe what they're trying to do? Interestingly, as you said, China is hosting this. So, do you have any knowledge of this meeting?
I think that one of the things you have to understand that China, we have seen in the last year or two a big change. China was very, very focused just on economy, on really building a global idea of global trade. And we see them more and more proactive lately on the diplomatic side. We've seen China brokering the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is the one thing that really shook up the administration. Following that, the administration changed the policy end to end. From Saudi Arabia being
the U.S. administration. But just let me interrupt. Can't this be also said to be? I mean, everyone's speaking about the Belt and Road Initiative, which is essentially trade. They're like paving. Right. Isn't it all around that? Are they really interested in diplomacy?
No. It's not. It's not just about that. It's about China viewing its role in the world on a much bigger scale than it was before. It's not just about trade. It's also about setting policies, being more involved diplomatically. And this is exactly what the US administration should be aware of. That there is a player who wants to be much more dominant than it was before in areas that the Chinese didn't operate before. This is what we can learn from this process.
Can I just ask, this is like not really mainly related, last question from me. Has Israel changed its relations with China since the beginning of the war? Because China has been supporting of some, of Hamas in its media, etc.
Israel, I think that looks at China very differently than the US. For US, China is an enemy. It's a challenge. It's their adversary. Israel looks at China mostly from an economical point. We see 1 billion Chinese, and immediately we calculate how much money we can do from 1 billion Chinese. So it's a lot about economy. And Israel, we want to bring tourists from China. We want to have economical relations and so on. But we understand that talking about military issues, talking about sensitive technologies, the US is very, very, very sensitive about these issues. Remember the Falcon deal? And it's very clear in Israel that even when you want to do a big economical project, like, for example, the port in Haifa, we need to take in account the US position on these issues. And to do that, Israel built a designated commission that has experts from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from other ministries, that when they view a big deal with China, they analyze it in a way that looks also at Israel's relations with our biggest partner, which is the US. And today, Israel tries to minimize mistakes and frictions when it comes to the relationship with China, but Israel doesn't see China not as a rival and not as an enemy and not as a challenge. We look at China mostly from an economical opportunity. Can't hear.
Hold on. Okay, I was on mute. Okay, last question. Just really last question. You don't have to. You can answer briefly. For us to get, to get ahead with Saudi Arabia requires the precondition of a Palestinian state, which is kind of a non-starter at this security situation. Is Iran for them a bigger incentive than a Palestinian state here?
I think that the whole idea of pushing a Palestinian state comes from the US administration. I don't think the Saudis care much about that. And, we did 4 peace agreements without a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Middle East and beyond. And I think that if Saudi Arabia gets what it really needs, Saudi Arabia doesn't need a Palestinian state. Saudi Arabia needs a solution for Iran danger. They want a strategic alliance with the US. They want to see a coalition in the Middle East standing strong. They want long-term solutions for their economy while moving from oil-based economy to a much more diverse and modern economy. This is what Saudi Arabia really cares about. And this world is about real interests, not imaginary ones. And I think that if the next administration will deal really with real politics, with real needs, very fast we'll have an agreement with Saudi Arabia. And again, this is providing that there is a strong Israel, an Israel that won the war. So we need to do our side. We need to win the war.
Understand. Okay. Thank you very much for this briefing, Amir Avivi. I would just like to say this will be later available on our YouTube website. And from August 1, these briefings will be free to attend only for our members. Always insightful. Thank you for this. And until we meet again.